10 horas, 11 horas, só enrolando. Agora é meia-noite. Deixa eu ir fazer logo esses squats pra ir dormir. Hoje é coisa de perna de novo. Tem uns squats e tem um outro. Os squats, velho, é muito fácil. Tava aprendendo a fazer uma variação como os que vai de uma perna só assim. Só que parece que eu não vou direito assim. Quando eu olho meu vídeo, eu não. Parece que eu não desço tudo, tá ligado? Eu acho que dá pra tentar descer mais. Só que eu acho que é um problema com a flexibilidade de minhas juntas. Também fazer mais lento pra sentir mais o peso. E aí eu também sofro bullying porque dizem que na cama não presta e eu vou me alejar ainda fazendo as coisas lá na cama. Então, será que se eu botar a perna ali dá pra eu fazer o coisa? Acho que não, né? O. Como é o nome? A flexão, o abdominal. Porque isso aqui não vai segurar, o pé vai escorregar, não tem como botar pressão suficiente aqui pra eu coisar. Como eu seguro aqui? Eu faço aqui assim porque tem que segurar com a perna tem que travar. E a perna fica aqui assim, trava. No chão não dá pra fazer porque sempre não trava, né? Mas eu vou testar ainda. Então bora lá fazer essa porra pra eu poder dormir. Tô com uma parafusadeira aqui. O cara me falou que eu tenho que botar e rodar ao contrário. O Gustavo falou que tem uns caras que fazem um negócio e rodam ao contrário, só que eu não sabia também como era. Então eu vou ter botado aqui e fazer o abdominal aqui, né? Mas é isso aí. Tenho fome ainda. Como antes de fazer? É a vida, pra se jogar aqui e assistir aqui, ó. Esse canal aqui é top demais. Institute of Human Anatomy. Deixa eu aprender aqui uns negócios enquanto eu faço. Creatina, não tem creatina não. Porra do cacete.
We'll also talk about how it's made and stored, how much of it you can get from food versus supplementation, and how much you need to take for various benefits. It's going to be an energetic one. So, let's jump into this anatomical.
Porra do cacete, mano. Isso não segura não. Foda-se. Parece
So what is creatine? Creatine is a nitrogen-containing compound similar to protein. It's made up of 3 amino acids called arginine, glycine, and methionine.
Fazer assim, minha conta tá ruim aqui. Como é que
Plays a
vai ficar
very important role in the rapid regeneration of energy, especially for these amazing structures that you can see here called skeletal muscles. But how do we get it? Well, we can actually get creatine in 2 ways, through our diet, and we can actually synthesize it. Creatine is found in certain food sources, specifically foods like beef and fish. So those who consume those types of meats can get anywhere from 1 to 2 grams of creatine per day. And creatine can be directly absorbed through the mucosal lining of the gut without the need to break it down. However, if we're dealing with somebody who's a
ficar essa desgraça? Não entendo essa porra, cacete. Em 8 tá enquanto?
None at all. So that might beg the question, could you actually develop a creatine deficiency and miss out on this potential energy source? Luckily, no, because remember, it's built from those 3 amino acids. And as long as you're consuming those amino acids, in other words, getting adequate protein intake from other sources, there are certain organs throughout the body that can synthesize creatine.
Vou fazer 4 de 14 então. Acho que não vai dar pra 20 não, 20 é muito. Vai ser lento e pesado. Se eu fazendo mais, o overload vai ser fazer uma variação mais difícil. Então vou fazer uma variação agora mais lenta assim. Agora tem que tentar fazer o abdominal nessa desgraça aqui.
And so you could kind of think of it as filling your skeletal muscles with little creatine gas tanks. Now, a third of that creatine going into the skeletal muscle will just stay as regular old creatine, but about 2/3 of it will get phosphorylated and become something called creatine phosphate, also sometimes referred to as phosphocreatine. And that's going to be very important in just a second. One other little fact about consuming meat versus not consuming meat. research is pretty consistent in showing that those who do not consume meat, although they wouldn't be deficient in creatine, they still tend to have lower overall amounts of creatine in the skeletal muscle compared to those who do consume it. Which
Não, velho. Não tem como segurar, não tem pressão.
performance in certain types of exercise. And those types of exercise we'll address shortly. But luckily, if you choose not to consume meat, you can get creatine through supplementation. That is kind of one of the main
Tá grudando no chão.
is to discuss if it makes sense to increase creatine levels through supplementation more than what you could get naturally in your diet. And with all this talk about creatine,
Não, vai escapar, vou cair pra trás.
supplementation. And that's where the sponsor of today's video comes in, Free. These guys created the first creatine monohydrate gummy, which is awesome.
Tem que fazer na parede mesmo ali, velho. Não tem outro jeito. É onde trava o pé da pessoa. Isso aqui vai atrapalhar a postura?
Because they come in flavors like blue raspberry
Vai
or
mudar o
sour
quê, velho?
green apple. For me,
Incompreensível.
I love the convenience. No need to mix it
Fazer
in.
mais lento e fazer 14
I'll
também.
move them into your oral cavity and chew them up, which I especially love when I go out of town. I no longer have to pack a whole bottle of creatine or transfer some of it to a little Ziploc bag. But they also have single serving powder sticks for those of you that like the more traditional powder, which is also convenient to pack with you wherever you go. Now I do want to address the elephant in the room here. I get that I'm doing a video on creatine, and the sponsor of today's video provides creatine. But I've been taking creatine for years now, and I talk a lot about it with patients and friends, and I find very few reasons for people not to be supplementing with creatine. So if there is a high quality creatine product like Create, I can definitely support that. And as we are going to continue to learn throughout this video, creatine has multiple benefits, from improving exercise performance and, spoiler alert, even improving cognitive function, helping with sleep deprivation, and more. So if you're interested, go to trycreate.co/humananatomy and use our code humananatomy to get 30% off. That link will also be in the description below. And now, let's get back to the physiology of creatine. So how does creatine work? And how does it help provide the rapid regeneration of energy within our cells? Well, we'll first focus on what happens
Isso aqui, eu
with
sei que tem
our
um negócio aqui,
skeletal
ó,
muscle cells,
mudou.
also known as skeletal muscle fibers.
Ficar lento,
And here
pesa
we have
muito
this
mais.
ever so accurate drawing that you can see with this glorious
Não deixar
pectoralis
soltar e
right
ficar
here,
mantendo
looks
assim.
like the real thing. And we also
Não
have
precisa
the
sentir água.
rectus abdominis here, but this
É o
can
jeito
be
de
applied
fazer
to
certo
any
o movimento
skeletal
nessa
muscle
porra.
that you're working out. When our skeletal muscle fibers contract, they utilize or burn through the energy currency of our cells called ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And that phosphate is going to be key in just a second. ATP is only stored in limited amounts in your muscle tissue. So when we're exercising, we're burning through it like crazy. And since we only have limited amounts, our body has some pretty incredible ways to synthesize more ATP. And there are three energy systems that do this.
ATP.
The
Eu não
first
tenho
two are
creatina, não vou ter o
anaerobic,
ATP, por isso eu
in other
canso.
words, without oxygen. And those are the creatine phosphate energy system, and the other is glycolysis. The third is oxidative phosphorylation, which uses oxygen, or in other words, is the aerobic pathway that occurs in the mitochondria. But for this video, we're obviously mostly going to be focusing on the creatine phosphate energy system, also called the ATP phosphocreatine system. And this creatine phosphate system is best suited for very high intensity exercise, things that last about 5 to 10 seconds, like a full sprint, max vertical jumping, or high intensity weight training with heavy weights and low reps. So when you're contracting your muscles during that sprint or heavy lift, you're going to start burning through that ATP. As you burn through an ATP molecule, you'll break off a phosphate, and that releases the energy necessary for the muscle contraction. But that ATP will then become the ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. And this is where the creatine gets involved. And it's quite amazing. Remember, about 2/3 of the creatine stored in your skeletal muscles was stored as creatine phosphate.
Tá lento, tá
When it
tem
comes
que
to
contar,
enzymes
fiz
called
3 vezes 14.
kinase, that phosphate attached to the creatine is going to be broken off.
Que hora que eu vou
and
acelerando, o bagulho é
rephosphorylate
complicado.
ADP back into ATP. In other words, think of it as donating its phosphate to ADP in order to create more ATP that can be used for those high intensity muscle contractions. And this is an extremely fast process. It's only one chemical step or one chemical reaction. So really convenient for high intensity muscle contractions that need energy quickly. But there is a limit to this. Yes, it's a fast way to replenish ATP, but it only lasts about 5 to 10 seconds. because we only have so much creatine phosphate stored in our skeletal muscle tissue. And after these high intensity muscle contractions, all we're left with is creatine. So how do we restore it back to creatine phosphate? Well, it's going to take energy to rephosphorylate that creatine. And we're going to get that energy from another energy system. After you go for a sprint or do a set of heavy reps, you rest between sets, and you'll notice that you're breathing heavy. And the main reason you're breathing heavy is because you are utilizing oxidative phosphorylation, that aerobic energy system that I briefly mentioned earlier that utilizes oxygen within the mitochondria to generate high amounts of ATP. And this is how you replenish the ATP that you just burned through during that high intensity set, as well as provides enough energy to rephosphorylate the creatine back into creatine phosphate so that you can use that fast creatine phosphate energy system again for the next sprint or next high intensity set after resting about 1 to 3 minutes, as that's about how long it takes to rephosphorylate the creatine back into creatine phosphate. So answering the big question, can we pack more creatine into the skeletal muscle tissue in the form of creatine phosphate in order to improve athletic performance? Well, the data pretty clearly shows yes. Most people can increase their creatine muscle storage from about 10 to 40%. Now, some people don't respond much to creatine, but the majority of individuals can get those increases. But how much would you have to consume in order to increase it by that amount? Well, it's about 5 grams per day for benefits in exercise performance. But we are going to talk about a different dose for some other potential benefits in just a minute. But creatine monohydrate is the most researched and effective form. And some people will ask, can I get it in the form of food? Technically, yes, if you want to consume every piece of meat in sight, because you would have to consume a ton of beef or fish to get 5 grams of creatine. And when you compare that to how easy it is to just take a few gummies or powder, it's a lot more feasible to take it as a supplement. People can also do creatine loading by taking about 20 grams per day for 5 to 7 days, then maintain with 5 grams after that. The idea is to increase the levels more quickly if you're a little impatient. But the most important part is being consistent with that 5 grams per day to maintain those levels. Now, once the levels are increased, what does that mean for athletic performance? Well, you'll often hear people say that creatine supplementation increases strength. But this can be a little misleading because it doesn't magically increase your max bench press or make you a faster sprinter overnight. That's not how creatine works. It more
Então aqui,
indirectly
você vai ficar fazendo ressals, né?
over time.
Por estar embaixo, os músculos é diferente.
Training sessions.
Cada
What I
posição é
mean
um
by
músculo
that,
diferente.
based on what we've
Acho
learned
que dá pra
about
tentar aqui,
the
né?
creatine
Os
phosphate
pés aqui.
energy system, that
Acho que
system
não repete não, ainda vai
lasted for
tentar.
about the first 5 to 10 seconds of high intensity exercise until we ran out of that creatine phosphate. Then we have to either shift to anaerobic glycolysis if we want to continue the exercise or decrease the intensity. But that creatine phosphate system was all about replenishing ATP for again that first 5 to 10 seconds. But if we supplement and increase our creatine phosphate stores, we can continue that high intensity activity a little bit longer. Maybe you can sprint at that intensity for a couple seconds more. Maybe there's a weight you could only do 6 reps with, but now on creatine, you might be able to do 8 or 9 reps. So you are increasing your workload per session at that high intensity. And over time, that's going to pay dividends in your muscular adaptations and will increase your strength levels more efficiently because your workload is increased compared to if you were not using creatine. But creatine isn't just for your muscles. There's more and more information showing that it has some beneficial effects on the nervous system and even cognition. Just like in skeletal muscles, creatine gets stored in the brain, particularly in neurons and supporting cells called astrocytes, where it helps with energy production by increasing creatine phosphate stores. This boosts brain energetics, helping to regenerate ATP more efficiently to fuel demanding neural processes, reduces oxidative stress, and even helps maintain pH levels during high energy demands. Recent meta-analyses show it can improve cognitive function and memory in healthy adults, enhance short-term and long-term memory, mental clarity, processing speed, and even executive function. Now, I do want to say that all those seem like great benefits, and they are. But I don't want to give you the idea or the impression that you are just going to have this jolt of lightning with your memory, clarity, or processing speeds. These studies showed a small but noticeable difference in young people with more moderate differences in elderly people. So there seems to be an even greater cognitive benefit on older individuals. But here's something that is very interesting. The cognitive benefits of creatine seem to be noticeably greater when a person is more neurologically fatigued, maybe towards the end of a workday or in stressful or sleep-deprived situations. And this makes sense.
Eu senti agora, o outro fazia 20 e não sentia.
Agora no 14 tô ficando fraco das pernas.
Na metade ainda. Isso não se terminou. A vez passada.
Or if you're already neurologically stressed or fatigued, or even sleep deprived. But it is kind of hard to predict every stressful or mentally fatiguing situation. But oftentimes it's pretty easy to figure out if you didn't get much sleep the night before. So during sleep deprivation, you could easily take a higher single dose of creatine in order to help maintain cognitive performance when you're running on fumes. It's kind of like giving your brain a quick energy buffer to keep firing on all cylinders. But how much are we talking here? Well, there probably are some mild neurological benefits at the 5 grams per day that people are taking for exercise performance. But for neurological and cognitive benefits, most of the studies are suggesting at least 10 grams per day. It's kind of a maintenance dose for those unpredictable stressors and mentally fatiguing days. However, for acute situations like major sleep deprivation or targeted cognitive boosts, some studies suggest an even higher single dose, such as 20 grams, to quickly elevate brain energy levels, and then going back to 10 grams for maintenance. Now, some of you may think that those are very high doses, but people sometimes creatine load with 20 grams per day for 5 to 7 days straight when they first start taking creatine so they can saturate their muscles a little quicker. And so it's not like 20 grams per day is completely unheard of. And creatine has been shown for years to be safe and well tolerated by most individuals. So I won't go into all the details on safety and possible side effects because I actually covered that in a longer creatine video that I did a while back. So if you want more info on that, I'll link that video to this one at the end. But the point is, the research is showing that creatine isn't just about building your muscles anymore. It's also about supporting and boosting cognitive function. Who would have thought that the supplement that used to be stereotyped as a supplement for muscleheads could now totally be targeted to nerdy brainiacs with clever marketing like, I think they should use a slogan like, brain before brawn, creatine. And if any supplement company uses that, I do want a royalty. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you learned something new and useful today, and I'll see you in the next video.
Creatina fica no músculo e serve para carregar as reações de ATP. E como o cérebro é extremamente intenso no uso de energia, também ajuda. Só que tem que tomar ainda mais. O jogo é bruto. Isso aí.
The pull-up is often praised as the king of back development, and some people even think they need no other exercises to train their backs effectively. If you now think that this video brings the effectiveness of pull-ups into question, you are right. But before you jump to conclusion, let us explain why. Pull-ups are not easy, so most beginners, but even intermediates, struggle with one very important point. When they do pull-ups, they round their backs and bring their shoulders forward. This is actually pretty common, because it's the easiest way to do a pull-up. With this execution, you make the pull-up a heavily lat-focused exercise with support of the abs and the chest. So why is this a problem? Well, when you take a look at your back, you will notice that the back consists of many other muscles than just your lats. Besides the lats, the most important muscles of your back are the middle and lower traps, the rear delts, the rhomboids, and the erector spinae. All these muscles play an important role for posture as well as for shoulder and back health. So by neglecting them, you are nearly begging for imbalances, pain, and injuries. So what can you do about it? If you are a beginner, we suggest to not only focus on pull-ups, but also include other exercises like the reverse ring fly, the rear delt press on the ground, the prone raise, or the body row. We prefer the body row because it's the better all-rounder. But if you have big weak points and imbalances, you can try the other ones as well. If you're already able to do a lot of pull-ups, we suggest to work on your technique. Of course, you should also include some of the exercises mentioned before, but it's also possible to hit your rhomboids, traps, erector spinae, and rear delts with a pull-up-like motion. For that, we suggest the arch
Pular,
drag.
os caras botam assim.
This movement is like a mix of a regular pull-up and a row. The goal is to extend your spine and retract and depress your scapula when you pull yourself up. This movement targets nearly your complete posterior chain and is a very good alternative to the hollow body pull-up. Now you might think, why can't I simply extend my upper back and keep the hollow position in my midsection? Well, give it a try and you will notice why this doesn't work that good. The reason for this are the different modes of action
Very
of the
good.
anterior and posterior
That well.
muscle chain. The vertebrae of your spine are connected to each other. If you extend your thoracic spine, the lumbar spine and even your pelvis and legs get the impulse to follow this direction. This means it's simply not optimal to let your upper and lower body work against each other in a pull-up movement. However, we still have to tell you that it's not impossible to do. If your strength and technique is on point, you can aim for a straight spine, extended elbows, and retracted shoulder blades during a hollow body position. It's still not optimal because it only works if you pull yourself up very quickly, and once you lose some strength, you will fall back into the rounded shoulder and spine position. So if you want to target your rhomboids, rear delts, and traps, always favor the extended over the hollow body position. How much you extend it is up to you. A slight arch is easier, but the more you arch, the more you will work your erector spinae and your glutes as well. The arch itself is also not a problem for your back, because there are only low shearing forces in the hanging position, and of course you protect your spine with muscular tension. So what about the hollow body pull-up in that case? Should you quit it completely and only do the archback version? Well, no. The hollow body pull-up has its purpose. It has the best body alignment to train for muscle-ups, typewriter pull-ups, archer pull-ups, one-arm pull-ups, and rope climbs.
Ah, porra.
In addition, it's also the best execution to do weighted pull-ups because the hollow body position puts very low pressure on your lower spine due to the straight alignment. If you use a weight belt and do the archback version, the belt forces your pelvis into a passive posterior tilt.
Eu ficando
That
tonto.
makes it harder to actively
Eu com a agulha na
stabilize it,
barriga.
and with that increases the shearing
Como se fosse querendo
forces
vomitar.
and the negative
E
influence
agora?
around your lower back. So what's the conclusion? If you are an intermediate or advanced athlete, we suggest to include both pull-up versions as well as other pulling exercises in addition. Beginners should focus on regular pull-ups and include easier pull exercises like rows to target the muscles that you won't hit with the hollow body pull. Alright, now you know how you can adjust your pull-up training to make the most out of it. Of course, we included the same principles in our workout programs you can find on CaliMove.com. Every program comes as a step-by-step on.
Pull-up versus chin-up, velho. Fazer só chin-up. Que porra é essa?
What's the difference between pull-ups and chin-ups? In a nutshell, pull-ups use the overhand grip, which is when your palms are facing away from you. Chin-ups use the underhand grip, which is when your palms are facing towards you. These two exercises seem very similar, but the truth is that both movements are much more different than it seems on the first view, even if you just switch the position of your hands. To understand this, we have to take a look on the mechanics for both movements. In both movements, you start with straight arms in a hanging position. From there, you engage your back and initiate the movement by pulling your shoulder blades down. After that, you bend your arms and try to pull yourself up as high as possible. In the last part of the movement, you let yourself down controlled. The different arm positions have a different impact on the muscles you use during the movement. You can classify the arm position into 3 different grips: the overhand grip, the neutral grip, and the underhand grip. All 3 grips use the biceps, the brachialis, and the brachioradialis. The biceps and the brachialis can produce a lot of strength, while the brachioradialis is the weakest of these 3. The chin-up with the underhand grip has the best muscle activation for the biceps and the worst for the brachioradialis. The neutral grip is a good mix between biceps, brachialis, and brachioradialis activation. The pull-up with the overhand grip has the worst muscle activation in the biceps, but the best for the brachioradialis. When we take a look on the muscle activation, it's clear why chin-ups or neutral grip pull-ups are easier for beginners than pull-ups. They simply involve the strongest muscles around the elbow joint more efficiently than the overhand grip.
É, vai ser mais fácil. Eu achei que eu até não gosto de fazer. Esse aqui usa o brachialis, velho. Que bosta, hein? Meu deve estar na merda externa, hein?
Of course, a pull-up
Nem
or
existe
chin-up
mais.
is not only about the arm.
Parte isso aqui é a pulso.
One of the strongest muscles for a pull movement is the latissimus dorsi.
Latíssimos.
A common misconception is that many people think a pull-up is better for your lat activation.
Deixa eu aprender
than
logo
chin-up.
os pull-up aí que eu
But in
vou
fact,
fazer essas porra em breve, assim que eu
want to build a wide
pegar isso aí e botar. Talvez amanhã. Ainda é dia de descanso, mas é isso aí. Deixa eu tomar ali. Tem que comer a pizza. E aí eu vou comer
Now we take a look on the body position. And here
as
it gets
coisas, o
Have you
proteína.
ever noticed that hollow body chin-ups or
Foi isso aí.
belt chin-ups
Fazer o bagulho lento é muito mais intenso o negócio. Então eu vou abaixar para 12, é o máximo das minhas coisas, e fazer lentamente, que vai ser a Progressive Overload. Fazendo as variações mais difíceis.
The chin-up is
Valeu.
for the hollow body position, while the pull-up is